Hello, in this video you join me in my home studio and we're making a video on monotype printing with stencils. It's part of a series that the Regional Print Centre are putting together about printmaking at home. Let's get started. I'm often asked what's the difference between a monoprint and a monotype, and I think it's best described by Mark Graver in his book Non-Toxic Printmaking. And what he writes is, a monoprint is a print with a defined image, for instance etching, which will print the same way each time, which has colour added to it. A monotype is a print which is a one-off, usually created by painting ink onto a flat surface and printing the image onto paper. So I think that gives you a good definition of the two. Maybe that will surprise a few people, I'm not sure. In the method we're going to look at today, we're going to concentrate on doing a monotype print using paper stencils. There are many ways of making monotype prints, and maybe they will be featured in future videos. But for today we are concentrating on using stencils. And stencils really is the basis of screen printing. You use a stencil which is on a mass, on a mesh, and the ink is transferred through the mesh onto the paper, creating the image that the stencil has made. And we're basically working on that principle. The materials we're going to need to do this project today, we're going to need paper to print onto, we're going to need paper to make a paper stencil, or we can use a piece of fine acetate and cut through that. We're going to need masking tape, a cutting knife, a cutting mat, and we are going to print today using oil pastels and dry pastels. We could use this method using a stencil brush or a sponge and sponging ink through the openings that we're going to create, but for today we're going to use oil pastels, and I'll go into oil pastels very shortly. The stencil that we're going to make, we could use, as I've said before, we can use a piece of acetate, which can be overhead projecting film. You don't want it too thick, you want it of a reasonably sturdy, thin size, and that's ideal for stencils. We could use that. The alternative is to take a piece of newsprint, which is very thin, quite delicate really, and use that, but as it is, it's not really going to be tough enough to do the stenciling with and take the sort of hammering that we're going to give it. So it's a good idea to reinforce it, and you can reinforce it very easily by just adding some parcel tape over one side of it. It won't increase the thickness very much, and it will give it that sort of extra reinforcement that will be needed for the method that we're going to do. So just take strips of parcel tape and just layer them all along, tuck it over the other side, and it's done. That's great. The piece of work we're going to make today, I'm going to use two stencils, and I've got a very simple image that I'm going to work from, which is this one here on the table. From this I'm going to make some tracings, two colour separations, One will be a colour and the other I think will probably be just black. But you can see from this drawing that there's lines on here that if I cut the image up as it is now, the image is just gonna fall apart. So I need to go back to this drawing, look at it and see how I can incorporate the design, but in a way that will hold the stencil together when we're moving it around. Okay, I hope you can see now. I've been working on the tracings for this project, and I've made two tracings, which will be, you would call them a colour separation. So the first tracing, we're going to print these areas here. So what I need to do when I come to make my stencil, I need to cut those out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark these with a line through, then I know what I'm cutting. I'll go through and do the whole of those. And then the second stencil, which is again another colour separation. As I said before, I had to figure out a way of joining this middle line here to the rest of the area that's going to be cut away. So the area I'm going to cut away on here is this. No, I'm doing it wrong. So the area I'm going to cut away on this is this area here. And it's also going to be these here, because that's what I want to print. But I'm going to have a problem, and I need to figure out how to get around it, because these shapes here, these are going to float in mid-air. There's nothing attaching these, and this will be a solid piece here. They need to be connected to the other parts which are solid, so as the stencil doesn't fall apart. So see, this bit here is going to be cut away, that's going to be cut away, and all this here, but these need to stay. So what I need to do is make a bridge. I need to make a bridge which will go from there to there, there to there, there to there to there, and maybe one that will go from there to there, there to there, there to there. So these little tabs here will stay in place when I come to cut the stencil. They need to hold it all together. I hope you follow that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this now. I've transferred the drawing onto the stencils now, and the way I've done that quite simply with the acetate, I've just placed the acetate over the tracing and just drawn onto it. Very easy, very simple. So that's ready to cut. Put that to one side, and then with the parcel tape stencil, I've used some carbon copy paper underneath the tracing and just drawn over it again, and it's worked. It's come out okay. That's ready to go. So if I take this off, you may be able to see that the underneath is the traced drawing ready to go. Put that to one side. So as you can see, I've already cut one piece here. As I mentioned previously, the knives I use to cut stencils are scalpels, the Swan Norton scalpels. I find the standard handle when you're cutting a lot of stencils, it does tend to sort of wear onto your finger, and your finger begins to ache a little bit. Whereas with these, which I bought from Amazon, I've a sort of mould around them which gives it a bit more area for you to press with your finger, and it doesn't wear, that narrow edge doesn't wear on your finger as much. So to cut these stencils, it's really very easy really. I'm just going to put my other specs on and I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so with these it's just a matter of just taking your time, going over the line, and this stencil is going to overlap the other stencil, so you will, I'm trying to avoid any white areas which may be missed on the cutting, and you can see that that comes away really easy. One thing that has occurred to me doing this is you don't really need to do it onto newsprint. You could take your drawing, your tracing, and just put parcel tape onto your tracing and use that as the stencil. It'll just save one process of transferring a drawing onto another piece of paper. Just save you a bit of time really. I should have thought of that in the first place. But this is ready to go now, so I'm going to carry on and cut this one. So with the acetate stencil, which I've just dropped on the floor, again here, it's hard to see, so what I'm going to do is put a piece of white paper underneath, which will help me see what it is I'm cutting really. So again, I'll take, say, this area here. Now I'll start in the middle, start this one here, it's quite simple. So just a bit firm pressure and just follow the lines, take your time, and it will cut really nicely. I always find it's important to have a sharp blade when you're doing stuff like this. Otherwise you find that it doesn't cut enough, so you end up going over your cut, which is not the best thing really, because you have two lines then. So quite often you get a little snag like that, which you just need to take it out. And like with the other stencil, I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of this and then come back to you when we've done that. And that's it for the moment.